What's up, fight fans from all around the world? I am your fight goddess, Chris Bowler, and I'm here in the war room again today with my beautiful fight family. Malissa Smith, she is a women's boxing historian, and my boy, Mr. Eddie Goldman. We call him the Conscious of Combat Sports, and we're going to give you guys a little brief review of the women's bouts that happened last weekend, because we didn't do a show last weekend. But Alicia Baumgardner, she retained her titles because that was her first defense, right?
That was indeed. She fought the one woman who ever defeated her, Christina Linodatu from Greece by way of Dominican Republic.
Yeah, I missed that fight. How was it? A good fight?
It was a terrific fight. Baumgardner, look, she came out, she was patient, she was technical. She showed off a beautiful array of skills. She beat Linodatu to the punch. However, the one thing with Baumgardner is she's a sprinter. And the thing about a sprinter is they need some recovery time. And that's something that she still has to work on in the gym. I thought she did a better job than with Mekhaled back in February when she won all the belts in terms of that recovery time. But she still needs to do a little bit more work in the gym on how to recover while you're still boxing, because she leaves herself open.
Wasn't it odd in that fight? In the first round, Baumgartner came out very, very aggressive and realized that she was going to dominate this fight. And then she took the second and third rounds off, basically, and did next to nothing, and then dominated the rest of the fight. It was odd when you take off the second and third rounds. You got to be so confident you're going to cruise the rest of the way to give away rounds 2 and 3 in a 10-round fight. But that's what she did. I don't remember seeing something like that.
Maybe she was conserving
energy. I think too, though, conserving energy. To me, it's all about the sprint, and she did expend a lot of energy, even with her patience. But we'll see how she goes. She'll even say it. I've got a way to go in my sport, and the way she's going to get there in her next series of fights, it may be that there'll be a mandatory with Delphine Persoon, which will certainly be a very tough fight for her. But the main thing is, she is now another, a U.S. undisputed boxer. She's out of Detroit. She shares the state of Michigan with Claressa Shields, who was happily there to support her for her fight. It was held at the Masonic Center in Detroit, had a really nice card, had a really nice feel to it. But where was it reported? Where did people really talk about it?
Just the boxing.
Who saw it? Who saw it on DAZN? And that's the problem. Why wasn't that fight on Showtime or on ESPN? What the hell is wrong with these broadcast networks that they're not making the deals to bring this kind of caliber fighter, these kind of caliber cards into a platform in the United States where Americans can actually see the dang fight? Who the hell is paying for DAZN that can actually see her box? So in that sense, it's still very disappointing for women in the United States. They should have been lauding and celebrating her, and it is not what happened. It was barely a peep after the fight, after she won, did a terrific job, really elevated the sport, elevated herself, made a real statement for the state of Michigan, again, as becoming perhaps a regional boxing center. But this is the second women's fight card in a row out of Michigan, Claressa Shields being the first, which was only shown on DAZN.
Yeah, got no media attention.
Representation from any other media. That's ridiculous. Where the hell is, where are these people? And you look at these cards, there are no dang women on the cards that select. What is that about? You're ceding the whole thing to the UK, to Boxer and Sky Sports and to DAZN and Matchroom Boxing. How is that going to grow the sport of boxing at all?
Well, DAZN is a disaster. DAZN has just been bleeding money, and they're either going to have to be bought out or closed down or merge or something pretty soon, as the whole streaming industry really bleeding money. I think except for Netflix, just everybody is losing money, cutting things. That's why they've been so tough with the writer's strike and the actors strike against these big studios. But I wrote some stuff about it, and in terms of, yeah, you had your perfunctory articles in the boxing sites wrote about this fight. They write about virtually every fight, and that's okay. That's fine that they do that. But outside of the usual suspects, what Melissa said is correct. And if you look at these things, I gave like a couple of examples. The New York Times finally covered a boxing show live from Detroit. They had a reporter there, and instead of focusing on the main event and an undisputed world champion, the article was a feature almost entirely about the pro debut of Andy Cruz, which in and of itself is a very important story. The guy's been the best amateur in the world for the last several years. He had a big tussle with the Cuban Communist Party dictatorship to get the hell out of there to fight pro. So I don't want to downplay that story, but the whole story was just about him. And they mentioned Baumgartner in one sentence at the end of the 23rd paragraph of this story, with a reporter there ringside in Detroit. And then you also had the same night PBC had a card on Showtime, and that was where Frank Martin won a close decision over Artem Haratunian. No women on that card. And as I also wrote about, it gets worse. Also on DAZN, besides the Baumgartner-Leonardatu card, they had one of these ridiculous so-called influencer clown shows of amateurs pretending to be pros. And after one of these fights, a woman on the card flashed her breast to the crowd after the match, and this was shown live on DAZN. And if you look at the media coverage, they're still writing about that shit. Everybody has stopped writing, again, except the people that write about everything about boxing. Everyone else has stopped writing about Baumgartner a day or two after the fight. This thing is still being discussed all over the place by these imbeciles. And there was just a very telling comment. All you need to know what Clarissa Shields wrote on Twitter. She wrote, "Wow, this is a step backwards for women's boxing. Stop this shit." Very understated, but that's what DAZN is showing us, because their lineup is just filled with these so-called influencer cards, which are just an absolute disgrace. They're not professional boxing. They're not real professional boxers. If these people want to go into boxing after doing something else, they could start like everybody else. They could start in the amateurs, work their way up from the pros, start with the 4-rounders and 6-rounders and so forth. Or unless you're an Andy Cruz, you're an Olympic champion, a 3-time world champion, you could go right to something else. But these people are not Andy Cruz. These people are nothing. And so this is the kind of coverage that you're getting all over the place. And it just shows how bankrupt the boxing media is, and the sports media in general. They're just going for clicks by writing about this thing and showing the video of this woman and every angle and every follow-up story about this. Meanwhile, after her fight, they asked Alicia Baumgartner the usual question, "Who do you want to fight next?" And she listed 3 other undisputed champions. She listed Amanda Serrano, who was the featherweight undisputed champion, Katie Taylor, the lightweight undisputed champion, and Chantel Cameron, the super lightweight undisputed champion. And she might have to deal with one of these mandatories, who knows? But Eddie Hearn, Alicia Baumgartner's promoter, said it should be Amanda Serrano. Now, of course, she fights in a few weeks, They have to make that fight. It's different promoters and all that sort of stuff. The point being, she's the best, calling out the best in women's boxing. And with fights like Spence and Crawford, we have to wait years and years and years till those fights are made. In the heavyweight division, they're still not being made. We still don't have Bivol against Beterbiev, and all these other fights that we could think of are not being made, and they're delayed forever and ever and ever, except in women's boxing. And I talked about the undisputed champions. In boxing, there are basically 17 weight classes. But in women's boxing, there's very little activity above 168. There's, in terms of light heavyweight, cruiserweight, and heavyweight, there are fights there, but you don't see a lot of belts. And I don't even know if all the ranking bodies rank people at those weights. So the action is really in 14 weight classes. In 6 of those, almost half of them, you have undisputed champions, meaning they have the WBA, WBO, IBF, and WBC belt all at once, which is very hard to do because the mandatories come around and they strip you because you can't fight 4 people at once. So it's very hard to maintain that. And so there are another fighters like Jessica McCaskill got stripped of 1 or 2 of these belts because you can't fight everybody all at once. And even Clarissa Shields got stripped of 1 of these belts, not by losing them in the ring, but because of all the nonsense with the sanctioning bodies. Even so, even with the proliferation of these sanctioning bodies, the women are doing something about it by having the best fight the best. And everybody complains correctly for decades. It's crazy that you have a zillion champions today, and yet the women are doing what they can within this very flawed and corrupt structure by unifying the titles. And other women may not have 4 titles, but they might have 2 or 3. They're working their best to unify these belts. So this should be getting tremendous coverage, but it's not. Even in the boxing media, they'll mention it, but they don't highlight it. And again, this just shows how corrupt the boxing media is. They're tied to these various promotions. If you look at who's behind these websites, you're going to see promoters and networks. And these promoters and networks, really, they'll show certain fights, but they don't want to really emphasize that the whole structure of boxing is absurd, and you need to have undisputed champions and do away with this absurd situation of all these rival sanctioning bodies and mandatories and interim champions and intercontinental champions and champions in recess and regular champions and all this other crap that boxing. I try to explain this once to my brother, who's not a fight fan, about the situation. And he's a baseball fan. He follows baseball and football. He's followed these all his life. And he was just appalled. He couldn't believe it. It was like I was saying something crazy, but I was just explaining what exists in boxing.
Well, it is, but more to the point, you have the issue of how people are ranked, how they have opportunities to fight. And it's all about sanctioning fees, because it's a lot of money that changes hands. This is how these organizations stay in business. I mean, you have an undisputed champion at feather. So why would you have an interim? Because you're making some money, right?
That's crazy.
So in terms of the opportunities, I mean, in different eras, boxing was very, very big in Mexico 10 years ago because there was nothing here. I mean, a champion like Alicia Baumgardner would go down to Mexico to compete for belts. She could actually be a headliner on a Mexican fight card as a champion. And then it was in Argentina for a while, shifted to Mexico. And now it's in the UK. And at least in the UK, almost every fight card now has a female on it. It's televised, whether it's local or on streaming services or on Sky or on Matchroom DAZN on their cards. And you've got European fighters cycling through. You've got Mexican and Argentinian fighters circling through. But in the United States, you have absolutely zero. Every single fight card, there is not a woman on it. I mean, yeah, okay, we'll have our dear, beloved Sinisa Estrada, right? Fantastic fighter, unified fighter, really is poised to become an undisputed. She has that kind of talent and brilliance. She was supposed to fight on July 29th. Well, guess what? Spence Crawford ended up being on the 29th. So they bumped her to the 28th.
What?
Have you seen a word about her fight? Is there anything in the media about the fact that she's fighting a unification battle? Not she gets bupkis. Nothing. She's with Top Rank. How many women do they have? They have her and Michaela. Right? What is this?
So
PBC still refuses to have women on their card. They had them in 2016. What the fuck is wrong with it now? I don't understand. You are killing the opportunity to grow this sport by refusing to put women on these cards. It's just crazy.
Look at their ratings between 2016 and today. Now, true, more people are cutting the cord and streaming, but a lot of the people that are cutting the cord and streaming are not making up for what they used to watch on television to what they're watching online. In other words, the viewership of everything is down. People are just sick of the fees and all this crap, and the cable companies are losing customers. So what they do is they raise the fees all the time. When they raise the fees, more customers say, I've had it paying all this money for this stuff. And they don't do anything to improve this at all.
Listen,
it just gets worse and worse.
In 2000, in 1996, 1997, 98, 2000, 2001, every single goddamn pay-per-view fight had a woman on it. It was Christy Martin, Mia St. John, Lucia Riker, Samaya and Yana. They were all on those fight cards, and they did really well. They're Spencer Crawford, right? Are there any women's fights? Hell no. What the fuck?
That's the promoter's fault, though, and there's no
that
promoters
is promotion.
that are promoting those
so
guys.
Stupid.
Right.
It's stupid.
But most of those guys are misogynistic.
I don't know what they are, but it's the stupidity is unbelievable. We have women who won Olympic medals in 2020 who are now pro. Why are they not fighting on these cards?
Yeah.
Where, they're brilliant fighters. Why is it that, we had Tierra Brown here last meeting. Why can't she get a goddamn promoter? She's a great fighter.
Misogynist and stupid, because
it's the stupidity.
You would hardly call Don King the most progressive-minded person, but he was one of the first major promoters to put women on a lot of cards. And I was at a show in the Detroit area, the infamous Mike Tyson Andrew Galata fight, which ended up in chaos. The co-feature was a Layla Ali fight.
There you go. Card. So I don't get it. I don't get it, because you now are in a situation where we have 3 undisputed champions in this country, right? We've got Amanda Serrano, we got Alicia Baumgartner. We used to have Jessica McCaskill. She's no longer undisputed because she was stripped of one of her belts. And we got Alicia Baumgartner, Claressa Shields. What? I don't get it.
How many undisputed guy fighters are there? How many undisputed men?
Well, and I got to tell you, ESPY Awards, okay? There were 4 fighters on the ESPY Awards list for Best Boxer of the Year, okay? There was Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, right? Yeah. And you had Claressa Shields and Gervonta Davis. 3 of those fighters were undisputed. Okay? Claressa Shields, Tank, and Devin Haney. Undisputed.
Tank was maybe used to be. He's not.
Well, he was at one time. So who won? Claressa Shields.
Right. There are only 2
Where the
men
hell was that?
There are only 2 men undisputed fighters now, and they both really have to have an asterisk next to their name. Canelo Alvarez at 168, but he's been fighting all over the place. up at light heavyweight. And his next fight is against Jermell Charlo,
Yeah.
who is 154-pound champion, 168 fighting 154, and Devin Haney at lightweight. But a lot of
Yeah.
people consider Gervonta Davis and Shakur Stevenson ranked higher than Haney because he got it by defeating Kambosos, who upset Teofimo Lopez. So
Yeah. The
just
point
an
being,
odd situation.
Shields even won, right? This is a vote by the people, right?
Mm.
This isn't sports writers. This is people going in and clicking and going, no, I want her. I want her. I want her. So this is the voice of the people saying, we want her. We choose her as our boxer of the year, not women's boxer, not just boxer of the year. That's who we want. So can't get on a goddamn American channel.
There's three. Jermell is undisputed at 154.
Yeah. So, but the point is, she won. She won by popular vote,
Right?
not by sports writers, not by promoters. She won by popular vote. Who said, "Yeah, she's the quote. Yeah, we want her," and she had to go to England to get money, and now she brought it home in Detroit, helped to promote that fight. It's on DAZN. It wasn't on Showtime. It wasn't on ESPN. So what the hell?
Yeah, you'd think folks like Steven Espinoza would see that by popular vote, a woman boxer won the overall.
Any of these people,
overall
top ranked,
all of those
Showtime,
guys, right? So that should tell you something.
All these promoters.
That's right.
And you've got like Luda Bella scratching to get women on cards, scratching to get female fighters. He can't. He's ready to give it, bag it, and go to baseball. It's an easy life.
Right.
Baseball. He owns a baseball team.
He does.
He does. He's
got a minor league
team. He owns a couple of minor league teams. Yeah.
Yeah. So, cool. But what? This is what I don't get. And you talk about sports writing earlier. The Times, other than this article on Andy Cruz, has said, "Oh, we're not going to do sports writing anymore. We're going to push it all to our new platform, The Athletic." Which, P.S., you got to pay for. Okay, so not only you got to pay for your New York Times dang subscription, but you got to pay for The Athletic. So I took a look at The Athletic. I said, okay, I'm going to click on the boxing tab. Nothing, zero, zilch on women's boxing. Nothing about Claressa Shields. Nothing about Alicia Baumgartner. Nothing about the SB win. Zero. So
we should take over that. We should take over that page.
So, okay, I appreciate that they're covering women's, the Women's World Cup soccer, but hello, there's more than soccer here. How do you expect to grow boxing, or is boxing really dead? And to me, it's like, yeah, these people don't give a shit. They're giving it all away to MMA. They don't care. Right. Spence Crawford, that fight should have been 5 years ago.
ESPN makes their money with combat sports from the so-called UFC, because to get a UFC pay-per-view, you have to order it through ESPN Plus. And if you look at the promotions that ESPN puts out each week listing what's coming up this week, they'll have a category for combat sports, and boxing will be on the bottom, and it'll all be about the UFC stuff. And they're just constant because it's a much wider and richer fan base. So they're paying for pay-per-views all the time for that type of stuff. So that's where they're really making their money, and the ratings sink. The ratings get worse. And again, as I said, the streaming doesn't make up for it. And Disney, the parent company of ESPN, is looking to maybe sell off all a part of ESPN or bring in a partner, and they're cutting staff left and right, just like they dropped Andre Ward, who was the one sane announcer on the telecast. They even got rid of Max Kellerman, who was not only doing boxing but other sports on there. And I don't Eddie Hearn claimed that that ESPN is not going to renew the deal with Top Rank. I don't know if that's true or not, but remember, they really can't show Tyson Fury fights in the US, and I don't think they're that eager to go to the UK or Saudi Arabia to show Tyson Fury pay-per-views because of his association with the Kinahans. He can't, him and his Huey Fury and Tommy Fury, they can't get into the United States. So is ESPN going to keep paying for this? And the same thing with Paramount, formerly Viacom and CBS and all that, which is the parent company of Showtime. Are they going to keep paying for regular boxing shows on Showtime, which they're trying to merge with Paramount Plus, when it's getting maybe 300,000 people watching these things? And then on these cards are one fiasco, one scandal after another. This past Saturday night, the fight with George Kambosos Jr. and Maxie Hughes, the decision giving it to Kambosos by majority decision. People were completely outraged. It was one of the worst robberies that you've ever had. And
you
then
called it a robbery. What?
Yeah, there you go, a big robbery.
Wow.
That Maxie Hughes got screwed out of. And then a couple of months ago, the Raleigh Romero Barroso fight, where referee Tony Weeks stopped it with Barroso had, I think it was in the ninth round, had on all the cards, and he was in trouble. He was on the ropes, but he wasn't out or anything like that. And Tony Weeks just stops it, and gives the decision to Romero. That was on a PBC.
Go.
So here you have cards on ESPN with Top Rank and Showtime with PBC. We have these egregious robberies, and people are going to say, why the hell should I spend my time watching these things? These are the kind of decisions you'd expect to see in WWE, which is not a sport, is sort of a parody of sport and has its comedic and crazy aspects, and you expect that, but not in a real sport. And there are close fights and people make mistakes, but there's no accountability for this. People grouch the thing with the Kambosos Maxie Hughes fight. People went crazy on Twitter in the most uncertain terms. And then next week they watch something else, and it'll be some other scandal and some other craziness going on. And even the IBA, with all the crap that they've had, getting kicked out of the Olympic movement, they did have some exposure on a limited extent, way too limited, of match fixing and how the officials did it in the Rio Olympics. Of course, they didn't do it when Chowdhury was in charge before Wu, and they didn't do it under Rakhimov. They just chose to do it when Wu Qingquo was in charge. But they talked about how the referees and the judges, they had signals between each other and all the stuff that went on. When has there ever been an investigation like this in professional boxing of the match fixing and these
Never.
bad decisions? Right. And what you have in other sports where there are disputed decisions, you have a challenge system. Like in baseball, each team will get a challenge, and they could be a video review, and it'll go back to the MLB central office where they'll look at the replay from various different angles, and you'll see a lot of times the umpire's decision was mistaken. But that's like on a bang play. Is the runner safe or out? And the umpire missed the call. So there's an attempt to deal with mistakes like that. It's not perfect, but it gets most of those things correct. In boxing, there's nothing like that, and it's intentional that there's nothing like that. And yet they want people continuing to pay higher and higher pay-per-view fees and large amounts of money for tickets to see this nonsense going on. And that's another reason why Paramount is going to look at the low ratings for Showtime when they're making cuts all over the place and attacking the writers and actors. And Disney is going to look at the terrible ratings and the scandals on boxing on ESPN. And they're going to be some executives that are going to say, Why the hell do we need this shit? We could show something else that people have more respect for. And there isn't even much of an audience left for boxing. So these could be gone very soon. And you could just be left with streaming services or try and watch international fights, from the UK or Saudi Arabia or wherever. But the whole thing is being undermined. And nothing is being done about this. It just gets worse and worse.
They killed the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the USA we have 50 commissions, so 50 different sets of
more than 50. The card Cambosis and Maxi Hughes was the Shawnee Nation Commission in Oklahoma.
Right. Yeah.
All these other
That's true too.
Oh wow. All right. So look, folks, I think with that we're gonna wrap it up. Is there anything you guys want to cover before we bounce?
We gotta mention the big fights coming up this week, even briefly.
Okay.
Take
it away.
On Tuesday, you have Naoya Inoue, the monster, moving up to super bantamweight, his first fight there, against the champion Stephen Fulton. That's going to be in Tokyo, Japan. That's a really major fight. Inoue is one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the world. And then, of course, Melissa could talk about Sinisa Estrada in her unification bout that they buried on ESPN on Friday. I don't even know if it's on ESPN or ESPN Plus or whatever.
Yeah, she's the head of the card. The card is it's in Vegas at the Palms Casino Resort. It's a unification bout against Leonela Paula Yudica, who's Argentinian, a really good fighter. It's for the WBA, WBC minimum weight bouts. It should be a fantastic fight. Sinisa Estrada is a brilliant fighter, but it's not going to be on ESPN. It's going to be on ESPN Plus. So that's unfortunate. And because of the Crawford Spence fight on Saturday, all the sales are out of this fight card. Nobody even knows about it. But she will be fantastic, as she always is. She's a real fantastic fighter, great boxer, but with the instincts of a great fighter.
And I don't even know how many people are going to watch Spence and Crawford on pay-per-view on Saturday. That's an extremely important fight for who will be the best welterweight in the world. That's also in Vegas. And with everything that's been going on in Vegas, unless there's a real decisive ending in that fight, which is certainly possible that Crawford could knock out Spence, I'm just worried, since they want to have a rematch and maybe a trilogy out of this fight, there's going to be some more funny business going on with the Nevada Commission and the gambling casinos. They have the gambling company DraftKings is one of the sponsors of this fight. So, there's going to be heavy gambling on this fight, and that does nothing to help the integrity of boxing. And these are two undefeated fighters. I think Crawford should be a big favorite in this fight. Anything can really happen when they're in the ring, but we'll see what goes on. But that's one of the most important fights of the year that's taking place. And of course, with the hype going on, Top Rank says the winner of the Inoue Fulton fight will be the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. And Showtime says the winner of Crawford and Spence will be the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. So you're just getting a lot of nonsense. And there was one thing. I watched the propaganda shows, the all access shows, and there was just a couple of things about Spence. There's sort of little clues to watch that Spence has a lot of real doubts, because he talked about in that fight, we'll see who breaks first. Just the way he put that, He's expecting that it could be him. He already admits he's planning to go to 154. So if he loses here, he could go straight to 154. And then they showed his training. He had somebody using these crackpot methods of cupping and acupuncture there.
It's
and
not
cupping
crackpot.
is
That stuff works. Recovery.
no, there's
Yeah,
no scientific basis for it.
Well,
There's no in terms of medical and scientific basis, and particularly cupping is just utter nonsense. So he has some crackpot and a trainer in his camp there. So they just showed that they didn't really mention too much about it. So there's just a lot of red flags went up if you watch that series and sort of look beyond what they're trying to present. So I expect Crawford to easily win that fight, likely by knockout or TKO, but we'll see what happens.
Yep. All right. So Melissa, thank you, Eddie, for that brilliant discussion about and showing respect for women's boxing. You guys check out his article on Patreon. No holds barred. Melissa, go ahead and tell the people where they can find you, baby.
Sure. I am at Girl Boxing Now on Twitter, soon to be X, as in Malcolm.
I know that's the first thing I thought of. I was like,
okay,
X.
X. And I'm on Instagram and Threads, same thing, at Girl Boxing Now. I'm also on Spoutable. I'm having fun there, just doing some politics.
Oh,
and
nice.
Otherwise, my website is girlboxing.org. And thank you all.
That's right. You guys pick up her book, The History of Women's Boxing. You guys can get that on Amazon. Got to give you a plug, baby. All right, Eddie, tell the people where they can find you, baby.
At NHB News on Twitter. I'm still there until it becomes completely destroyed. That's where the live boxing and sports coverage goes on when there are big and little fights, for better or for worse. You could go to eddiegoldman.com and my Patreon, where the article on respecting women's boxing. And again, you don't see any articles like that in the so-called boxing media. So if you want to read some, or the Athletic or the New York Times or anything else, if you want to read some really good boxing journalism, support independent journalism, because these other disgraceful places are just not doing it. It's patreon.com/Eddie Goldman, and sign up and subscribe to keep us going on. And I am me. I am not my clone. We haven't found out where my clone is yet. So when we find my clone, we'll get him on here.
Yeah,
as well.
we need to clone you, Eddie. We need to clone you for sure. All right, my beautiful people. This has been the War Room. I thank you guys for tuning in. You guys can check us out at warsports.com. That's WAAR sports.com. And I am still on the X/Twitter bird crap app at Angry Afro Radio, because I am that angry Black woman. And you can find me on Instagram at Fight Goddess One, and also Threads. That is the new spot right there. That's my spot. I love Threads. You guys can follow me there at Fight Goddess One. Thank you all for tuning in. Peace, love, and push-ups. See you next time. Boom. All right. Good job, folks.
Thanks.
All right, go take care of you.